Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to talk about, or continue to talk about, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, of which I've already tackled one franchise inside the franchise. That was the Captain America franchise, of course, about the story of Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson. And I want to continue doing that by telling you even more about the MCU. And I'm going to do that now by talking about the main line, the timeline of the MCU. And I'm going to do that by talking about the Avengers movies. This is the first one with all the characters here. So I'll give you the disclaimer now, and then we'll get started. So, first off, and the reasoning for why I might flub a word is because, as I have said before in previous episodes, English is not my first language, so that means that I might still be flubbing some words that happens or not. Same thing with swearing, of course. Sometimes I get ahead of myself, or I lose my train of thought, or I'm still looking things up because I need something specifically, and that means I might have an awkward pause. Also, the text I'm reading is on my screen, which means that the screen becomes a bit brighter, and so I also become a bit brighter by extent. And yes, so I might swear also, as I said before, you just experienced the awkward pause I was talking about. So let's get started talking about this franchise. And I'm gonna start off by saying that what this really is about, because the Avengers, first and foremost, isn't just your typical origin superhero movie or continuation. It is quite literally a team up movie where all the heroes band together to fight a villain. And so that happens in this movie too. And I'm going to start talking about that right now. And so we start with our villain, of course. And I get this handy chart, I get this handy picture of all the actors who play a character in this movie. And one of those iconic ones, especially from this franchise, is the person playing Loki, played by this gentleman right here, Tom Hiddleston, was known for this specific role. Has become an icon, basically. And we find him as he talks to a person, or rather, a being called the Other, who is a representative of an extraterrestrial race, aka aliens, real aliens from out of space. Inside the MCU, of course. I'm not talking about aliens in our real life. And so the Other is a representative of the aliens known as a Chitauri, which will be shown, which are later in the movie. Okay. So the Other and Loki meet together, and so this Other, being this alien, has an exchange with Loki as he really, really wants an object called the Tesseract, which is a huge blue cube, like extra dimensional thing that will tie in later. What I just said. And this is also a very powerful energy source. And as they're meeting, we get glimpses to what is happening on Earth, specifically in America at a place called Project Pegasus, which is a remote research facility that his agency, SHIELD, which stands for the Strategic Homeland Intelligence Enforcement and Logistics Division or Department. And so Nick Fury is the director, and he arrives at this place at Project Pegasus with his helicopter. And as he has been getting reports of something happening, and by the way, Nick Fury is played by the incredible Samuel L. Jackson, that you see right here in this picture, who has been in tons of movies, and he is also one of those iconic figures from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so he meets up with the people on this project that involves a cube, the Tesseract. Cube is another word for the Tesseract. And he's got one of his lead people that he's met in a previous installment of the MCU before. I'm talking about the Thor movie, the first one, where we come to know about Eric Selvig, who was played by someone I've talked about before on a different franchise that is also owned by Disney, Star Wars. I'm talking about Stellan Skarsgård, who played Lufin Rael on the show Andor. And so he plays here Professor Eric Selvig, who originates from the four movies in this case, and he used to help Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, and her assistant, played by Kat Dennings, and now he works for Shield, where he is studying the Tesseract. And here we get the moment of where an outsider meets people on Earth as the cube is activated and opens up a portal inside the building, which slowly but steadily starts to crumble the building itself as Loki has come to Earth. Again, Loki played by Tom Hiddleston. And we get a little action scene here, also with some interesting dialogue between Loki and Nick Fury. And we meet another character here. Well, this happens briefly before this, but I'll say it anyway because he also appears in this scene. The person that Nick had on this detail, as a detail, in fact, and with that I mean someone protecting someone else, kind of like the Secret Service protects the President of the United States. There's someone protecting Eric Selvig and the team there, and that is Hawkeye, who is played in this movie by this gentleman, of course, Jeremy Renner. There's his picture. And so we get a scene between Nick and Hawkeye, and well, there's a little fun wordplay where Hawkeye says, "I see better from afar than close by," and so that gets us to the experiment with the cube, and the portal opens up, and Loki appears, and they have this fun Shakespearean dialogue, and that leads Loki to lash out at the researchers and at Nick Fury, and he shows off what he can do as a fighter, as a uh, is not really a magician, more like an illusionist, yeah, and a trickster, because Loki is a god of tricksters, and so we'll continue from there because Loki steals the Tesseract. Also, something important here, Loki has brought something of his along, and that is a scepter that has been given to him by the alien that he met before. And so he uses this thing to manipulate the minds of this research team that is studying the Tesseract. And so he, what's the word, brainwashes the couple of people that are there, including Eric Selvig, played by Stellan Skarsgård, and Clint Barton, Hawkeye, to his aid. Yes. And he uses them to get away with both his scepter and the cube, which he unknowingly does not know holds two things called Infinity Stones. And this leads to a chase outside of the compound. Oh, hey, folks, I had to cut a moment. Okay, but let's continue where we were. So, Loki escapes the Project Pegasus site with the scepter and the cube, aka the Tesseract, and he's pursued by one other, a little less important figure, but good figure from Shield nonetheless. That is the deputy director, Maria Hill, was played by this woman right here, Kobe Smulders, and so they, two of them, uh, Nick Fury and Maria Hill, and some agents chase Loki out as they're being, as they are also dealing with the fact that Loki arriving through the portal means that everything around them is crumbling around. And actually, Nick Fury has this iconic, well, ironic phrase where he says, where actually Loki says, no, let me rephrase for a second. So it's a conversation between the three of them, between Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, Loki, and Nick Fury, and uh, uh, Clint says to Loki, he is stalling for time. He's trying to bury us under the building. And Nick Fury responds like the pharaohs of old. And that is exactly what I wanted to say here. Because the, the pharaohs were used to make a pyramid lie in the middle. It's in fact a huge gravesite, effectively. Also, the same can be said for the Taj Mahal. But let's get back to the story here. So, as they chase him out, Fury decides that he needs to do something drastic here. And he activates something called the Avengers Initiative. And that's makes him send somebody. Well, let me say it a bit differently for a moment. We cut to another person that will be on this Avengers Initiative. And that is one of the people that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been working with for a long time. And I'm talking about the Black Widow, who is a former Soviet mercenary who has made quite a name for herself and is played in this movie after playing her in the two previous Iron Man installments. And of course, she is played by the incredible Scarlett Johansson in this picture right here. And we get a scene with her as she is tied up to a chair and is talking to, I'm thinking it's Russian military, and she gets a call for someone from the Russian side, and it's Phil Coulson, one of the people that was just present at Project Pegasus site. He's played by this man right here, Clark Gregg, and so he says, "You need to come in. We need your help on something, and she hangs up, asks the person that gave her the phone to get their phone back, and this old, older military Russian guy picks it back up, and we get a little cool action scene telling us exactly who the Black Widow is, especially in a team environment, as an introduction to her character in this team up movie, I mean. And how we get to see how she works, especially freaking amazing how you can get loose from a chair when you're tied up, and meaning all use of all limbs, basically, arms and legs, and you get that cool, uh, what would you say, like a spin almost, which is ironic because a Black Widow is a spider, and since I'm a person who originally speaks Dutch, a spin is also the Dutch word for a spider. Okay, that a little aside, but interesting enough. So we get that scene with her to the action, and we go from there as she picks the phone back up and walks out of there, of course. And we cut back to her in a different location as we find her in Kolkata in India, where she gets someone. Sorry for the background sounds. Uh, okay, so she's in India to get somebody else for the team. As Coulson says at the phone that I've got Stark, you need to go get the big guy. And with the big guy, we of course are talking about the Hulk and the person that turns into the Hulk, Bruce Banner. And here, of course, I have to say that a little behind the scenes too, that previously in the first Marvel movie, the Hulk, the character Bruce Banner and the Hulk are played by Edward Norton, but for the purposes of getting a an actor that is workable and has a schedule to do these movies, they have somebody else, and so we get Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and this directly ties into the plot as well, as he is one of the only people that could trace the Tesseract, because the Tesseract gives off gamma radiation emission, and Bruce Banner is an expert in gamma radiation, mostly because he tried to insert a similar kind of super soldier serum that was used on Steve Rogers on himself. But then, because of the gamma radiation, something else was born, aka the Hulk. A big, green, angry guy that smashes up things. And so we have in the scene, in fact, a young girl who supposedly needs Bruce Banner for help with people in her family that need help. And we get a little scene where Bruce meets with Natasha for the first time, and it's kind of hinted at that there could be something more between the two of them. And he kind of snaps for a moment just to show up that, in fact, they need more than one person to handle him, of course. And we'll continue from here with the next person. And so we meet up with Nick Fury as he meets up with the person I've talked about in the other franchise, of course, Captain America, aka Steve Rogers, who's of course played by Chris Evans. We've talked a lot about on the Captain America franchise, and Steve is trying his luck at training, and he has like these huge. Actually, no one I can show you something. You see this weird black and white thing right beside me? That's a boxing thing. And so Steve is using one of those things that is hanging by the ceiling, in fact. And so he is trying to smash it up, get some training in. And Nick Fury approaches him at this point, and it gets a bit of an debriefing on what is happening, basically. And Fury talks to Steve about what he knows of the Tesseract. And once again, here we And once again, here you see how the plot is visible through all the characters because they're all um, relevant and drive the plot forward. Because Steve initially, like I talked about in that episode about the first Avenger, he was trying to he was trying to stop the Red Skull from destroying America with those bioweapons that the Red Skull had made. But then the Red Skull got himself teleported through the cube, through the Tesseract. And so Nick Fury wanted to know more about that. And Steve was become a bit disillusionist, says to Nick as he's walking away that you should have just left it in the ocean. And so while that is happening, well, surely after this is happening, we get to meet up back with Phil Coulson, once again, played by Clark Gregg, this guy right here. And he goes to visit Tony Stark in New York, where he has his giant building, the Stark Tower. Of course, Tony Stark, played by the incredible Robert Downey Jr. in this picture right here. And this is in relation to the Cube 2, as Tony is not only a billionaire and a playboy, of course, but also has a high IQ and has made some innovations, including the Iron Man suit, of course. And so Selvig and uh, Tony talk, and of course, there's somebody else present that is Pepper Potts, that is both Tony's assistant and his girlfriend's, who's played in this movie, of course, by Gwyneth Paltrow. And we get fun scenes between the three of them with some flirtiness between Tony and Pepper, of course. And ultimately says, like, yeah, okay, fine. I'll join your Avengers initiative, as Tony has that scene with the info that he gets from from Coulson, as he shows this up in like a big fancy way with the technology that he has, and in exchange for Pepper getting on a flight so she can continue work the next day. So Coulson takes her away to the airport to, I believe it was LaGuardia. Yeah. Okay. And then we cut to Loki again, as he has arrived in Stuttgart in Germany. And He's there because they need a specific kind of item to stabilize the Tesseract. And so Loki is there as he steals the show with his theatrics and his Shakespeareanness. And for proper entry, they need to have the biometrics of the person in charge of the science part of this building that they're at, where there's also a gala at the same time. And so Loki finds the person responsible for this science research institute thing, and as we see in the scene in the movie, he flips them over a thing, and it clearly looks like he's about to stab him in the eye, but actually he's just um, how would you call it? Like reading the eye of the curator of maybe curator is the wrong word. But anyway, the person responsible for, I guess, both the gala and the research institute. So you get this satisfying scene of Loki just enjoying the fear that this gives people that are present there. And he has that smirk, of course. And so that is used. So he has this device to read that eye of the guy responsible, and Barton, Hawkeye, uses a similar kind of device so he can get into the research institute to get the thing that they have to use to stabilize the tesseract, and this is something called iridium, which is in, I believe, asteroids or meteoroids. It's a specific kind of rare earth material that they can use to stabilize the tesseract, and this leads us to a confrontation with Loki as he is doing all the Shakespearean aspect for himself, and he gets the people outside and he herds them together as he uses illusions of himself, and he pleads for them to listen and kneel so they can all listen to him as he wants them to show fealty to him, basically, to show their loyalty. But then someone stands up, an older man who's probably had some terrible experience in the past when it came to, I'm guessing, the Nazis. And he has this phrase, there will always be men like you. And Captain America falls in before this man as he's about to get blasted by the scepter. And we get the confrontation between Loki and Captain America, who fight each other, not together. And surely, as this is happening, we get the introduction of the team coming together as Natasha is in a weaponized helicopter, basically, of shields, and she, of course, is following along what is happening with Steve and Loki. And her PA system of her helicopter is disturbed, of course, by Tony Stark, who drops in with some AC/DC music into the helicopter, which is, of course, fun. And we get a fight scene, a very brief fight scene with Loki and Iron Man, and that leads to Loki getting captured by Shield. And Loki surrenders. Actually, he doesn't really get beaten up, but he does get captured. And so Loki is brought to Shield, and Shield has this giant vehicle that they have. It's called a helicarrier, kind of like a flight carrier that the U.S. Army, of course, uses in different places around the world, but they've got one that is an elevated version that can be in the air in one of the spheres around the planet. I'm guessing the stratosphere. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? I'm not an airplane or cosmos or whatever specialist. So, okay. And while Loki is being escorted to this thing, to the helicarrier, he and the others in the plane, sorry, the helicopter, Natasha, Steve, and Stark, are interrupted by another person that is about to come onto the team. And that is, of course, someone that Loki knows well and has known well for a very long time. And that's, of course, none other than his adoptive brother, Thor, who, of course, is played in this movie by this guy, Chris Hemsworth. And we get Loki pulled out of the helicopter by Thor, and they have a brief moment where they talk, very Shakespearean, of course, about do you have the thing that I need to have? Because the cube in this movie is pretty much the MacGuffin. Like, everybody wants it, everybody needs it, we need to get it so we can go further. And here, they're interrupted by Tony, who goes after Loki, and he bumps Thor out of the way. We get a fight scene between the two of them, and that shows off how both how different they are and how we're supposed to read their characters as they slowly become a team called the Avengers. And we see Tony use, of course, his suit, the Iron Man suit, and Thor using his hammer called Mjolnir. I'll say it right for everyone that doesn't say it right. Mjolnir, his famed hammer, because Thor is based on the mythological god from Norse mythology, of course. But this is the MCU version from both this franchise and from the Marvel comics. Who's had his own adventures at this point right now too. We've had the two. I think the you know what? I'll look that up for a second. And the question is basically, has Thor had that second Avenger adventure? I'll look it up differently. Give me a moment. Ah, okay. So he's had this adventure before, where we get Thor's origin movie, where we meet him and the people around him, like Eric Selvig and Jane Foster. And his second movie is supposed to come out after the movie I'm talking about right now, The Avengers. That is The Dark World, which arguably to a lot of people is one of the worst movies when it comes to the MCU. But let's continue here with The Avengers, of course. So for an Iron Man duke it out, there's kind of a stalemate between them as Steve Rogers intervenes. And he has a funny comeback to Black Widow where she says, like, these guys are basically gods. You can't really touch them. But he says, I believe there's only one God. And so Steve intervenes, leading to them kind of showing off in their powers as Tony and Thor have been doing for a while now. Seeing that the lightning that the Mjolnir can summon and use on Tony also powers up his suit because it's made of lightning, of course, which basically is electricity that powers his suit. And we get a cool, ironic shot, iconic shot with for landing his hammer on Cap's shield, the vibranium shield that he's been using for some time now, which uh, lays waste to a good couple of trees as they're in some kind of forest. My guess it's the Black Forest. And so the three of them get Loki back on board into the helicarrier, the flying base of S.H.I.E.L.D. And here we get almost everyone together for the first time. And we have this conference moment with them. And here we learn that Steve is starting to catch up, and he has a joke, of course, where he totally gets that Nick Fury says that he saw two of the most finest men that he knows turn into monkeys. It's a bit more than that, of course, but it's just like I got that reference, which creates an iconic meme that we now all know. So they disagree on how to approach it exactly, but with Bruce and Tony now together, they can find out how to really get their hands on the Tesseract as they can finally trace it properly as a team that is not complete yet meets for the first time. And so Tony escorts Bruce to the science lab that they have on the helicarrier, and they start to find out how they start to trace the cube, the Tesseract. Okay. And we see how they hang on together, but also do we have some disagreements on things. And Steve realizes that I might not disagree, I might not agree with them all that much, but something does feel fishy here. And so Steve goes to investigate it himself and finds that actually there is something amiss. And he comes back to the science lab to the to discuss it, of course, and he drops one of those energy weapons that they've been making from the energy cube, from the energy that the cube emits. And we get another discussion scene between Natasha, uh, Tony, and Steve, and Bruce, and Nick Fury, too. Yeah. Amazingly, I get all the characters, right? And so, oh, and four, too. Yeah. So here it comes to light that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been using the Tesseract to create weapons of mass destruction so they can use them against extraterrestrial threats, aka aliens or people from other worlds, because of what happened in For's first movie, where he got pursued by the Destroyer, which was a being that Loki used to go after that Loki used to go after Thor in the first Thor movie. And in this moment, as they're discussing, the people that Loki has been gathering from Shield and from Shield's enemies come into the helicarrier as Hawkeye uh, has shot an arrow, which he activates into an explosion, which disables one of the rotators that keeps the helicarrier afloat in the air, of course. And so we get some fight scenes here, which are very fun. And as this argument comes to an end, we get that moment where they all scatter for a bit. We get uh, Tony and Steve that have to deal with the rotator that's blown. We also get Nick Fury and Maria Hill, played by Nick, uh, Samuel L. Jackson and Kobe Smulders, as they have to deal with the troops that have that Loki has on his side, and Clint Barton too, and then also Natasha and Bruce Banner as they've fallen through the thing they were standing on in the science lab, and the explosion also leads to Bruce becoming the Hulk for the first time, and luckily Romanoff, the Black Widow, um, escapes the Hulk after Bruce Banner has transformed into him, and so Natasha is almost about to get wounded by the Hulk when Thor intervenes, stopping the Hulk's rampage. And because of all the chaos, they need to get back at those mercenaries, we'll say, that Loki has. And, and Nick Fury needs someone to go and deal with Barton and Romanoff. Natasha says, you know what, I'll do it. And she does. And we get a fight scene between the two SHIELD agents in a way more humane but very badass fight, of course, as they fight each other using their skills. Hawkeye with his bow and arrow, and Natasha with guns and with knives and her batons and all of that, and her tech. And that's a very cool fight that we get. Ultimately, leaving her to do, well, the thing that could knock you out. And actually, she does that. She does knock him out with one heck of a punch to the forehead, which knocks Clint out cold. And we get a scene of Thor going after Loki as Loki has been captured. Uh, I should have said before, though, there was a couple of scenes where we got Nick Fury talking with Loki as he's stuck in this thing that was clearly built for something else, something a lot bigger. In fact, those are specific words from those scenes. Also, with the same phrases that have been used before when Nick Fury met Loki before, when they were talking about ants and boots, as the roles have been replaced, of course. And so Thor is about to get Loki as he seemingly escapes from this thing that he's been holding in, and he falls unfortunately into the trap, of course, and Loki gets out of this prison that he's been in. And he, of course, says, "Are you ever not going to fall for that?" And by the way, let me know in the comments if you want if that was a good attempt at a British accent or not. And Loki uses the ant boot system to get the prison out of there and get Thor out of there, only to be confronted by Phil Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, and he has a big ass weapon with him that has been made through the energy that they got from the Tesseract. But unfortunately, Loki uses his illusion trick here once again, and he stabs Coulson with the scepter that he has now, as one of his men that got into the helicarrier got him back. And so he stabs Coulson with it, fatally, unfortunately. And right before Coulson is about to die, he tells Loki that you are going to lose because you lack the conviction to do anything. And so he finally blasts Loki into a place, a part of the helicarrier, before he dies. And right before he dies, he has a brief conversation with his boss, with Nick Fury, and he says, "Here's what I'm," and he says literally, "Here's where I'm clocking out," and unfortunately he dies, seemingly because, as you later know or have seen the series Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., he comes back alive for a process called Tahiti. And maybe I will talk about that if I ever cover Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV series. Okay, so uh, Fury tells this to the team that is in contact with each other for communications with those little crazy microphone, well, not microphone, but like listening device that they all have, which leads to another conference moment with only Fury and then Tony and Steve, as they did manage to get the rotor back up. As Steve, in that moment, also was busy with those mercenaries that got onto the helicarrier, and so here we get another tender but also sad scene, of course, because Coulson has died for the cause, and Fury uses this moment to motivate them to come together again and work as a team. And he tosses the cards that he had been talking about, that Coulson had been talking about to Steve about for him to sign, as he is a big Captain America fan. And so that gets to a moment with Steve and Tony as they are getting to another place, to the place, in fact, where Coulson was killed by Loki. And they get to a point where they talk about how do we get over this? How do we actually get at Loki? And it gets the right idea that Loki has is that, well, he's a narcissist. He wants to do things. He wants to show off to the world what he is doing. And so they come up with the place where he is doing it, and it is, ironically, in New York, right atop the Stark Tower. And so we get a scene uh, also relevant to this with Natasha and Clint, as Clint has now completely is back in control of his marbles, we will say, because the hit to the head that Natasha gave him got him back his cognitance, cogn- got him back his consciousness. That other word is too hard for me to say. Anyway, so Clint and Natasha uh, meet Steve back as he says, we have an idea what Loki might be doing, and so the three of them get on a Quinjet, which is a special kind of advanced plane that Shield has made, and the three of them go to New York with that thing, while Tony flies ahead in his Iron Man suit as he has reestablished it because it got damaged when he was working to repair the rotor that got blown up before. Yes. Okay. I managed to make that make sense. Yeah. All right. So the four of them go to New York, and here in fact they do see that there is a generator built upon the tower that Eric Selvig has used to open up a portal so that the alien force that Loki is about to use can come to this universe and to this Earth. And here we get a bunch of scenes that are fun and interesting, where we get another meme moment, of course, with Tony meeting Loki for the first, No, not the first time, of course. Um, but we get that scene of Tony coming into the tower, and he takes off his armor because he's getting a new special one waiting for him in a moment. And they do have that moment where Loki is about to use the scepter on Tony, and Tony does, of course, joke about this, saying, he got performative issues. And we get the iconic lines of, "I have an army, we have a Hulk," which is a fun moment, of course. And we get some more Shakespeareanism from Loki, and he throws Tony out of his own building. And Tony, of course, has got those things on that will get the new suits to him. And midair, he catches it, and he flies back up. And he also says to Loki that, "I just said that you pissed people off, and I will avenge Phil Coulson, who you just killed on the helicarrier." And this leads us into one of the first fights of this battle that is about to take place. While Selvig is working to get the portal open. And so we get various scenes of the Battle of New York with Tony fighting Loki for a moment, and then seeing the portal open for the first time, of course, and trying to take it on like a scout would. As I think, uh, uh, let's talk about teammates and roles on the Avengers for a moment. So, well, Tony is very much an inventor and a genius. Is very much when it comes to combat a scout-like figure who can fly using his repulsor technology from his suit, of course, and that makes him a handy figure to deal with airborne threats, which is what he shows off in this moment, of course, as he uses his repulsor technology to fight off the aliens, the Chitauri, as they are getting through the portal as it opens up. And you know what? I want to talk about another moment before the real battle actually breaks loose. We also meet up back with Bruce Banner, who, after his fight with Thor in the helicarrier, got back to his normal size. To Bruce Banner, we got some help from somebody in the building that he landed in, and got some clothes back on, of course. And he comes back to the team in New York, and they meet up all together. And we get that iconic scene, of course, of all of them in their combat uh, gear and outfit, everyone showing off. And this is such an iconic moment for this franchise, by the way, for both the Avengers and for the MCU, because this is almost, I believe, even directly from the comics. I believe that maybe I might be wrong. Anyway, so we get that iconic moment, of course, of the six of them together for Tony, uh, Natasha, Clint, and then Captain America, and I'm missing someone. I'll re-say it again. So, uh, Hawkeye, Captain America, Black Widow, Iron Man, the Hulk, and Thor. There, I got all six. And those are the original six Avengers, as they embrace their role for the very first time in battle in New York City. And here they start to work together for the first time, and well, Steve Rogers being the soldier and being a strategist, something of a strategist. I'm not making that joke from Spider-Man, of course. Anyway, so well, I did want to talk about combat roles and roles on the team. So Steve very much is the leader of the team, like a team leader. I'm borrowing the phrase from the Mission Impossible franchise, which I covered in a different set of videos you can check out, of course, on the channel. Brief plug. Sorry for that. I needed to do that anyway. But anyway, so uh, Steve assumes his role as the field leader, and he gives everyone their thing to do in the battle, which is for Hawkeye to be the sniper of the team, calling out the different Chitauri that are going around. You get Tony serving as a scout, turning things apart, and as lonesome but flying around, of course. You got Floor acting like a super powered, uh, I would say a tank, really, as he is just smashing up everything that he can fight. And the same role goes, and that sim also goes for the Hulk, of course, as Bruce Banner. Also, iconic shot for him where he reveals that it's not sometimes that I get angry. It's all the times that I get angry. And we see the iconic shot of him punching the big Leviathan that the Jadari have. And we get that iconic shot of the team taking him down for the first time. And so both Thor and the Hulk are basically like tanks of the team, taking on multiple tinier threats at once or giants bigger ones, either by themselves or in partnership with each other. Yeah, as we get those scenes also. And then we have, of course, Cap as team leader, of course, and then Natasha as basically on the ground working operational, but then also showing off that spy kind of vibe with her identifying Loki, who is on like a chariot kind of chitari thing, like like the technique basically is in any fight, like identify your weaknesses of your enemy and then weaken them at that point. And so that's what she does in that moment too, where she uh, gets that boost from Steve with the shield, and she gets onto one of those chariot things that the Chitauri are using to rack up and make shit explode in a blaze in the city, of course. And we get those chase scenes with her and to Loki as he is on another one of those chariot things. Also, briefly before we get the fight with Loki and Thor on top of the Stark Tower, of course. And we get all sorts of fun scenes all between them. You got the moment where Hawkeye says to Iron Man, "From you do have some strays here," and he points them out. And kind of in the military sense, they use the copy and Rajtat system, of course, as they are now working in team, and so we get a lot of combat systems from them. And so with Natasha, the Black Widow, on top of one of those chariot things, she finally gets to the building, to the Stark Tower, where she meets Selvig, and who is now finally free from the mind control that Loki had him under. That the scepter that Loki brought with him can shut down the generator. And so, while all the action is happening on the field, we get a scene with Nick Fury as he meets the people of the World Security Council, which is like a larger oversight organization that for the security of the world, as it says. And there's another memeable moment from this uh, meeting between Nick Fury and the World Security Council. Um, as Nick, as Samuel L. Jackson, as Nick Fury says, "I recognize the decision of the council, but given that it's a stupid ass idea, I will not do it." And he's referring to the Security Council wanting to nuke New York City, especially Manhattan, as the Stark Tower is somewhere close to Grand Central, as we see in the movie, in the scenes here. But then they disobey the command from him, and they do send a jet with a potential, I think more like a tactical nuke, like something that could level a place and not affect other areas. But then we get another scene with Fury where he learns of this as Maria Hill informs him that there is a flight getting off the helicarrier with one of those tactical things on it, probably. And we get him armed with a bazooka where he shoots up one of those things, but then the other one he goes because there's two of those flights that get off. And so one of those goes to New York. Guy with the pilot of this plane, sets off to New York to Manhattan. Luckily, Fury informs Stark that you get a nuke incoming and you need to do something about it. And so Iron Man meets up with the pilot, of course, and the pilot shoots off this missile, this nuke, and Tony successfully intercepts it. And instead of letting it nuke Manhattan, of course, which shouldn't be done, he holds on to it. I just bumped my mic. Anyway, and so Tony catches this missile and he aims it at the sky and into the portal. And at the portal, which is basically a wormhole, because on the ground in Manhattan, they realize that we cannot keep fighting these things, these monsters, these Jatari aliens. And so Tony, in his Iron Man suit, catches the missile. He aims it at the wormhole, at the portal, and he fires it off into space. We get a little applause scene from the helicarrier of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a moment. And Tony, at the last point, as he's about to enter a different place in space, he lets go of the missile and he slowly falls back to Earth. Well, it looks slowly, but it's probably not slowly, given physics and gravity, all of that. And so the missile flies to the Chitauri fleet, which completely tears it up, as it is kind of a nuke thing. And so Tony falls back to Earth from there, and the team is on the ground, meeting each other, Thor and Cap, as they fight together, fight the Chitauri together, and they look up, of course, and they see Tony falling, and they say like, he's not slowing down. And as Tony falls into the city, the Hulk manages to capture him from the sky and gets him to the ground, to Grand Central, close by. And in a different kind of way to resuscitate someone, Banner, as the Hulk, roars loudly, and this wakes Tony back up. And there's that joke, of course, where he says, "Nobody kissed me," right? And so we get in to the end of this moment as Natasha, on top of the Stark Tower, uses the scepter of Loki to close off the wormhole, the portal above them, and it does close behind Tony. And we get a short scene here where they all meet up. As Ford has Loki imprisoned, and he's about to take them to Asgard. He's about to take him to Asgard, which happens in his next movie, in For the Dark Worlds, where Loki is going to face justice for his crimes on Earth. And we also get that iconic restaurant scene with all of them as they are eating shawarma. I need. I was thinking of what the name was, but I have it now. They are eating shawarma for a moment, and that is where this movie seemingly ends. And I say seemingly because, in true Marvel fashion, there is an after credits scene here where we get the leader of the Chitauri, as he meets up with his master and to talk about the failed attack on Earth, as the Avengers are born from the ashes of their failure, and we get the little glimpse at who it is as the the master of the Chitauri turns his face, and we see Thanos for the very first time. And by the way, in this movie, he's portrayed by not the person who actually plays him in live action, uh, which is, of course, I have him here in a moment. Yeah. So anyway, so we get that after credit scene. We see Thanos for the first time meeting with the other, as they talk about the failed threat that they brought to Earth. And so that is where this movie ends. So that's a lot from me. I want to thank you for listening and watching this episode as I talked about the story of the first Avengers movie, about the team coming together and their roles and the story going forwards. And so I want to thank you for all of that. And also, if you like this kind of content, you can like underneath this video. You can also subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. You can comment also if you want. And also, please share with friends, family, people from work, or people online if you like this kind of uh not yeah, I'm gonna say content again. So thank you very much for listening and watching. I've been Frederik of the FWX podcast, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.